The bamboo pen trembled against rice paper. Darkness surrounded everything on Kakuzu Ridge. A Japanese officer wrote words that would change everything. His hands shook as he recorded the impossible. April 12, 1945, 2:47 in the morning. Okinawa held secrets that shattered decades of belief. The Americans see through darkness itself. This cannot be rumor anymore. Our infiltrators died at 70 yards. Complete blackness surrounded them. No muzzle flashes appeared anywhere. They watch us while we stumble blind. Everything the Imperial Japanese Army taught about night fighting had crumbled. 3 years of darkness dominance meant nothing now. Japanese forces owned the night from Guadalcanal to Burma. Their attacks in pitch black had terrorized Allied troops everywhere. But this Coral Ridge changed everything. American soldiers engaged infiltrators in absolute darkness. Their precision defied human ability. The 60th Division's night assault unit lay decimated. Each warrior killed by invisible enemies firing with impossible accuracy. No star shells lit the sky. No searchlights swept the ground. No flares illuminated targets. Just carbine fire from positions that should have been blind. The Americans possessed something that transformed Japan's greatest advantage into a killing field where only they could see. Unknown to Japanese forces, they had encountered revolutionary technology. The T3 carbine carried an infrared sniper scope. Later designated M3, this system allowed American soldiers clear vision at 70 to 125 yards in complete darkness. Security surrounded this technology. Most American troops never knew it existed. The weapon would contribute to psychological devastation among Japanese forces, who built their entire doctrine around night superiority. Night warfare transformation wasn't happening in massive battles. It occurred in darkness, where Japanese soldiers learned their empire's greatest tactical advantage had become obsolete. American technology had made it useless overnight. Japanese night combat mastery ran deep through history. Since the Meiji Restoration, the Imperial Army emphasized night operations. This offset Western technological advantages that threatened Japanese forces. Port Arthur in 1904 saw Japanese night attacks overwhelm Russian positions. These positions had seemed impregnable during daylight. Decades of experience in China refined the doctrine. Night infiltration and assault became Japanese tactical superiority's signature. The Japanese military's night fighting manual was captured and translated by American intelligence in 1944. It stated clearly that night levels all technical superiority. In darkness, warrior spirit and training overcome mechanical advantages. One trained Japanese soldier at night equals 10 enemies who rely on technology. This wasn't mere propaganda speaking. Guadalcanal in 1942 proved these words. Japanese night attacks nearly pushed Marines into the sea. Battles at Edson's Ridge and Henderson Field were won by margins so thin that Marine commanders privately admitted Japanese night tactics almost succeeded. Colonel Merritt Edson wrote in his after-action report words that showed the terror. They came at night like ghosts. Our men fired at sounds, at shadows, at their own imagination. The Japanese moved through darkness as if born to it. Statistics proved Japanese night dominance. The U.S. Army's Operations Research Office analyzed combat data from 1942 to 1944. Japanese forces inflicted 60% of American casualties during night operations. Night combat comprised only 30% of total engagement time. Night infiltration units achieved significantly higher casualty ratios compared to daylight operations. Mathematics showed darkness belonged to Japan. Japanese training for night combat was extensive and rigorous beyond Western understanding. Soldiers trained blindfolded for months. They learned to disassemble and reassemble weapons by touch alone. They practiced moving silently in complete darkness. Communication happened through subtle touches and prearranged signals. They studied American equipment sounds until they could distinguish an M1 Garand's action from a bar's at 50 yards by sound alone. The revolution in night combat began not on battlefields. American laboratories created the change. The Infrared Sniper Scope project originated in 1943. The National Defense Research Committee recognized the need for night vision capability. RCA, Radio Corporation of America, had been developing image intensifier tubes since the mid-1930s. By 1943, they created the 1P25 tube. This tube converted invisible infrared light into visible images. The system consisted of several components working together. An infrared spotlight emitted light invisible to the human eye. It mounted above the carbine barrel. A scope containing the image intensifier tube detected this infrared light. It converted the light to a visible green-tinted image. A heavy battery pack was worn on the soldier's back. A cable connected it to the weapon. The complete system weighed approximately 28 to 30 pounds. Heavy, but it provided something priceless: the ability to see and engage targets in complete darkness. The T3 carbine carried an experimental designation. Later standardized as M3, it was a modified M2 carbine fitted with this infrared system. Testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground showed remarkable results. Operators achieved 80% hit rates on man-sized targets at 70 yards in complete darkness. Revolutionary accuracy for night combat had arrived. Effective range varied from 70 yards in poor conditions to 125 yards in ideal circumstances. Limited production began by late 1944. RCA manufactured approximately 1,500 infrared scopes during World War II. About 150 complete T3M3 systems reached the Pacific Theater by spring 1945. The weapons arrived with strict security protocols. Only specially selected marksmen received training on the system. They were forbidden from discussing the equipment. Even with other American forces, silence was mandatory. The Battle of Okinawa began April 1, 1945. It would become the first major combat test of infrared night vision technology. U.S. Army units involved in the invasion received revolutionary capability. The 96th Infantry Division and 7th Infantry Division got the first shipments of T3 carbines in early April 1945. Distribution was limited. Typically, 2 carbines per rifle company, in sectors where night infiltration was expected. The U.S. Army's official history, Okinawa, the Last Battle, documented immediate effectiveness. The infrared sniper scopes proved devastating against Japanese night infiltration tactics. The 96th Infantry Division's after-action report noted the change. Enemy night infiltration, previously our most serious tactical problem, has been largely neutralized by new equipment. This allows engagement of targets in darkness. That first night of combat changed everything. April 2, 1945. Japanese forces launched their traditional night infiltration attacks against American positions. These attacks had been devastatingly effective throughout the Pacific War. They met a new reality. American soldiers equipped with infrared sniper scopes could clearly see Japanese soldiers moving in what they believed was concealing darkness. A report from the 7th Infantry Division described the psychological impact perfectly. Enemy forces exhibited confusion and disorganization when engaged by accurate fire in complete darkness. Traditional infiltration tactics were abandoned after initial casualties. The infrared system operated on simple but revolutionary principles. The infrared spotlight was essentially a sealed beam lamp with an infrared filter. It projected a cone of invisible light up to 150 yards. This light reflected off objects and was captured by the scope's image intensifier tube. The 1P25 tube, manufactured by RCA, amplified this infrared light. It converted the light to visible wavelengths. The operator saw a green-tinted but clear image of the battlefield. Technical Sergeant John Murray of the 96th Infantry Division was one of the first trained sniper scope operators. He described the experience in a 1985 interview with the Army's Center of Military History. Looking through that scope at night was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Japanese soldiers appeared as bright green figures against darker backgrounds. You could see their faces. Their rank insignia identified their weapons. They moved carefully, professionally, using excellent light infantry tactics. But they had no idea we could see them. The psychological advantage matched the technological one. Murray continued with observations that showed the complete reversal. The Japanese had owned the night for 3 years. They moved with complete confidence in darkness. Watching them through the scope, you could see that confidence in their movements. Then we'd fire, and you'd see the confusion, the panic. They couldn't understand how we could see them. The infrared spotlight remained completely invisible to the naked eye. Japanese forces never saw it coming. Operators were trained to fire single shots or short bursts, then immediately relocate. This made counterfire impossible. Even if Japanese forces could determine the general direction of incoming fire, they couldn't respond effectively. Within a week of the invasion, Japanese night operations on Okinawa had dramatically decreased. The 32nd Army, defending Okinawa under General Mitsuru Ushijima, had planned extensive night counterattacks. These formed part of their defensive strategy. These plans were largely abandoned after the first week's casualties. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, senior operations officer of the 32nd Army, was one of the few senior officers to survive the battle. He wrote in his post-war memoir, The Battle for Okinawa, in 1973, words that showed complete bewilderment. Our night assault units, which had never failed in 3 years of war, were being eliminated before reaching American lines. The Americans possessed some capability we did not understand. While Yahara's memoir doesn't specifically mention infrared technology, he likely never learned the exact nature of American capability. But he documented the complete breakdown of Japanese night operations. Units that specialized in night combat refused to leave their caves after dark. Sophisticated infiltration tactics refined over decades were abandoned completely. The U.S. Army's Operations Research Office calculated devastating effectiveness during the first week of combat on Okinawa. Infrared-equipped units accounted for approximately 30% of all Japanese small arms casualties during night operations. They represented less than 1% of American weapons. This extraordinary effectiveness led to rapid changes in Japanese tactics. Declassified technical reports from 1945 reveal both capabilities and limitations of the infrared sniper scope system. The device operated effectively in complete darkness, but it had several significant constraints that Japanese forces never discovered or exploited. The battery system used heavy lead-acid cells similar to automobile batteries. This limited operation to 20 to 30 minutes of continuous use. Intermittent use could extend this to several hours. The weight, nearly 30 pounds for the complete system, made rapid movement difficult. Operators were essentially fixed-position specialists rather than mobile infantry. Weather significantly affected performance. Heavy rain reduced effective range to under 40 yards. Fog and smoke scattered infrared light, creating halos that obscured targets. White phosphorus, commonly used in combat, rendered the system temporarily useless. However, Japanese forces, unaware of the technology's nature, never systematically tested these conditions. The infrared spotlight, while invisible to the naked eye, could theoretically be detected. Anyone looking directly at it through certain optical devices with coated lenses might see it. Some Japanese naval binoculars actually had the capability to detect infrared. But Japanese forces never realized this or developed detection procedures. As the Okinawa campaign progressed, American forces refined their use of infrared sniper scopes. The 7th Infantry Division developed a technique called infrared ambush. They positioned devices to cover likely infiltration routes. Trails, water sources, gaps in wire obstacles all became killing zones. These positions would remain dark and silent until Japanese forces entered the kill zone. Then they would engage with devastating accuracy. The 96th Infantry Division's after-action report described their employment method. Sniper scope operators were positioned to provide interlocking fields of observation. Primary sectors were assigned with overlap to ensure complete coverage of defensive frontage. Operators engaged targets of opportunity while reporting larger formations for artillery or mortar fire. Another innovation was psychological warfare through selective engagement. Some infiltration attempts would be allowed to pass unmolested. Others were completely eliminated. This randomness created paralyzing uncertainty among Japanese forces. They never knew whether they were being watched. The limited number of devices, approximately 150 for the entire Okinawa operation, meant careful tactical distribution. Priority went to sectors where night infiltration was most likely. Gaps in lines, supply routes, water points, and approaches to command posts received coverage. The scarcity actually enhanced effectiveness by creating uncertainty about where the capability existed. Japanese intelligence desperately attempted to understand American night fighting capability. Captured Japanese documents from Okinawa, translated by the Allied Translator and Interpreter Section, ATIS, reveal various theories about American night vision. These ranged from partially correct to completely fantastic. One intelligence report from the 62nd Division, dated April 20, 1945, speculated with remarkable insight. Americans may possess infrared detection equipment similar to aerial photography devices. Countermeasure: movement during rain may degrade effectiveness. This was remarkably close to the truth. But without understanding the active infrared spotlight component, Japanese forces couldn't develop effective countermeasures. Another report suggested Americans had developed a drug-enhancing night vision. This led to experiments with massive vitamin A consumption among Japanese troops. Some units tried covering themselves with mud to reduce body heat. They incorrectly assumed thermal detection was involved. The most accurate assessment came from a captured Japanese technical officer's notebook. Americans use artificial light invisible to human eye. Detection method unknown. Counter-detection impossible with current equipment. But this insight came too late and wasn't widely disseminated. The effectiveness of infrared sniper scopes on Okinawa can be quantified through various military reports. Numbers tell a story of technological dominance. Approximately 150 T3B M3 carbines deployed across the battlefield. 30% of Japanese night combat casualties in the first week attributed to infrared-equipped units. 94% reduction in Japanese night operations from April 1st to June 1st, 1945. Night engagement ranges increased from 10 to 15 yards, typical for unaided vision, to 70-plus yards. The 96th Infantry Division reported that sectors with infrared coverage experienced 78% fewer successful infiltrations compared to unequipped sectors. The psychological multiplier effect was even greater than direct casualties. Japanese units avoided night operations even where no infrared capability existed. The 10th Army's G2 Intelligence Section noted in their summary, the complete transformation. Enemy has largely abandoned night infiltration tactics. Prisoners report fear of American ability to see in darkness. This capability, whether real or perceived in any given sector, has neutralized a primary enemy tactical advantage. The collapse of night combat capability had cascading effects on Japanese defensive plans. The 32nd Army's strategy had relied heavily on night movement. They needed darkness to resupply forward positions, evacuate wounded, and conduct reconnaissance. Without the ability to move safely in darkness, Japanese forces became increasingly isolated in their defensive positions. Supply lines that had operated under cover of darkness were severed completely. Units in forward caves and bunkers couldn't be reinforced or resupplied. Wounded couldn't be evacuated to safety. Communication between positions, often conducted by runners moving at night, broke down entirely. The sophisticated defense in depth that General Ushijima had planned became a series of isolated strong points. These could be reduced individually rather than as part of a coordinated defense. The U.S. Army's official history noted the strategic impact. The Japanese inability to operate at night, whether from actual infrared observation or fear thereof, contributed significantly to the acceleration of the campaign. Positions that might have held for weeks were isolated and reduced in days. Training materials for infrared sniper scope operators, declassified in the 1990s, reveal the thoroughness of American preparation. Operators underwent 40 hours of specialized training. This included multiple critical areas. Theory of infrared light and image intensification formed the foundation. Equipment maintenance and troubleshooting ensured reliability. Target identification and range estimation in green-tinted imagery required practice. Battery management and power conservation extended operational time. Tactical employment and positioning maximized effectiveness. Security procedures prevented capture of the technology. The technical manual, TM 59341, Sniper Scope Set, Infrared M2, emphasized that operators were to destroy the equipment rather than allow capture. Each device included thermite grenades specifically for destruction if position was overrun. This extreme security measure indicates how valuable the technology was considered. Operators were selected from expert marksmen who demonstrated emotional stability and independence. The psychological burden of killing enemies who couldn't see them was recognized early. Training materials emphasized that operators were saving American lives by preventing infiltration. They weren't simply killing helpless enemies. The American infrared sniper scope wasn't developed in isolation. German forces had parallel development with their ZG-12-29 Vampire system for the STG-44 assault rifle. However, the German system saw only limited deployment in the final months of the war in Europe. It was primarily used by Panzergrenadier units during the Battle of the Bulge and the Rhine crossings. The American achievement was not just in developing the technology. Success came in deploying it in significant numbers to the Pacific theater. Training operators effectively and maintaining operational security were equally important achievements. The Japanese, despite their own advanced optical industry, had not pursued infrared technology for infantry applications. Companies like Nippon Kogaku, later Nikon, possessed the technical capability, but they hadn't recognized the military potential. This technological gap represented a broader pattern in the Pacific War. Japanese forces often displayed superior training and tactics in specific areas like night combat, but American industrial capacity and technological innovation could rapidly neutralize these advantages. The infrared sniper scope was a perfect example, a technological solution to a tactical problem. While many specific Japanese testimonies remain unverified or were created as composite accounts, American combat reports provide clear evidence of infrared sniper scope effectiveness. The 7th Infantry Division's regimental journals from April 1945 contain numerous entries. These describe successful night engagements at previously impossible ranges. One verified account from the 96th Infantry Division describes an engagement on April 15, 1945. The clinical language reveals devastating effectiveness. Sniper scope operator engaged enemy patrol of approximately 12 individuals at 2,330 hours. Range approximately 75 yards. 8 enemy killed, remainder fled. No friendly casualties. Enemy showed no awareness of observation before engagement commenced. Another report from the 7th Infantry Division dated April 28, 1945, shows tactical innovation. Infrared-equipped position reported and engaged enemy supply party moving along Trail 3 at 02230. 6 enemy killed. Supplies destroyed by subsequent mortar fire directed by sniper scope operator. Enemy has not attempted to use this trail in subsequent nights. Unable to operate effectively on the surface at night, Japanese forces retreated deeper into Okinawa's extensive cave systems. These natural and artificial tunnels had been prepared as defensive positions. Now they became the only refuge from American night observation. Colonel Yahara's memoir describes this adaptation with obvious frustration. Our forces were reduced to remaining in caves during darkness. Surface movement was authorized only during daylight under concealment. This reversal of our traditional tactics was devastating to morale. This forced adaptation created its own problems beyond tactical reversal. The tunnel systems, while extensive, weren't fully connected. Units became isolated, unable to coordinate or resupply effectively. The sophisticated defense in depth that had been planned for Okinawa collapsed. Instead of coordinated resistance, it became isolated pockets that could be eliminated separately. Disease spread rapidly in overcrowded caves where ventilation was poor. Supplies couldn't be distributed effectively between separated units. Units lost cohesion as communication broke down. The defensive network that was supposed to protect Japanese forces became a series of traps. While infrared sniper scopes didn't directly cause all these casualties, they forced the tactical adaptation that led to these conditions. The battle for Shuri Castle in late May 1945 demonstrated the complete reversal of night combat dynamics. Shuri, the ancient castle that served as General Ushijima's headquarters, had been defended by sophisticated night counterattack plans. These plans were largely abandoned due to American night vision capability. The 1st Marine Division history records that expected night counterattacks during the Shuri battle never materialized. Enemy confined offensive action to daylight hours or dawn-dusk periods. Night defensive positions were abandoned without fight. Prisoners indicated fear of American night observation capability. By June 1945, as the Okinawa campaign entered its final phase, Japanese forces had completely abandoned their traditional night tactics. General Ushijima's final order, issued June 18, 1945, acknowledged this reality with brutal honesty. Night surface operations are prohibited, except for final defensive stands, where survival is not expected. The statistics from the entire campaign showed the dramatic impact of technological superiority. American night casualties decreased by 78% at 78% in sectors with infrared coverage compared to early Pacific War battles. Japanese night operations, which had been their primary tactical advantage since 1942, effectively ceased to exist. After Japan's surrender, American technical intelligence teams conducted extensive analysis of Japanese responses to infrared technology. The Strategic Bombing Survey, interviewing Japanese military leaders, found revealing information. While many were aware Americans possessed some form of night vision capability, none understood its exact nature. The Far East Command's Japanese Night Combat Study, published in 1946, reached definitive conclusions. The introduction of infrared viewing devices effectively neutralized Japanese night fighting capabilities on Okinawa. This single technological advantage disrupted tactical doctrine developed over 40 years. It contributed materially to the acceleration of the campaign. Former Japanese officers interviewed by occupation forces consistently cited the loss of night combat capability. They ranked it as one of the most demoralizing aspects of the Okinawa battle. While they could accept being outgunned and outproduced, the loss of darkness was different. Darkness was where skill and training had always prevailed over technology. This loss struck at the core of Japanese military identity. The infrared sniper scope's success on Okinawa led to continued development and deployment in Korea. By 1950, improved versions with better range and battery life were standard equipment. The M3 carbine with infrared scope became a specialized tool. It was designed for defending fixed positions against night infiltration. During the Korean War, Chinese and North Korean forces initially avoided night operations against American forces. Many were advised by Japanese veterans of Okinawa. They believed all U.S. units possessed night vision capability. This overcaution, based on the Okinawa experience, provided American forces with unexpected advantage in the war's early phases. The psychological legacy of Okinawa's night battles influenced communist tactical doctrine throughout the Korean conflict. Only after discovering that most American units lacked night vision did communist forces resume large-scale night operations. Even then, the fear persisted among enemy forces. Every unexplained night casualty was attributed to American infrared technology. The primitive infrared technology demonstrated on Okinawa evolved rapidly after the war. The active infrared system, which required an infrared spotlight, was gradually replaced by passive systems. These amplified available light without active illumination. By Vietnam, starlight scopes could function using only moonlight or starlight. This eliminated the need for active illumination that could potentially be detected by enemy forces. Modern night vision has progressed through multiple generations since those first crude devices. From the simple infrared of 1945 to today's thermal imaging and image intensification systems, the evolution has been remarkable. Current technology can detect human targets at ranges exceeding a mile in any weather condition. No active illumination is required for modern systems. The capability gap first demonstrated on Okinawa has only widened over decades. Yet the fundamental lesson from Okinawa remains unchanged in modern warfare. The force that owns the night owns the battlefield. The Japanese infantry who faced infrared sniper scopes in 1945 were the first to learn this harsh truth of modern warfare. Beyond statistics and tactics, the infrared sniper scope's impact was measured in human terms that often go unrecorded. American soldiers who operated the devices carried complex psychological burdens that weren't fully understood at the time. Many reported feeling more like executioners than soldiers. They killed enemies who had no ability to fight back or even see their attackers. Post-war psychological studies of sniper scope operators found higher rates of combat stress compared to regular infantry. The impersonal nature of killing through a green-tinted scope created unique pressures. Often watching enemies for extended periods before engaging amplified these effects. Veterans described the difficulty of watching Japanese soldiers prepare positions, eat meals, or write letters before killing them. For Japanese forces, the psychological trauma was different, but equally profound in its impact. The loss of night, traditionally a time of Japanese tactical superiority, created helplessness that transcended military defeat. Soldiers who had trained their entire careers for night combat found their skills useless. They faced an enemy who had transcended human limitations through technology. Military historians studying Okinawa's night battles identified crucial lessons that shaped post-war doctrine for decades. First, technological surprise multiplies through psychological impact far beyond its immediate tactical effects. The actual number of infrared devices was limited, but fear of the capability paralyzed Japanese operations everywhere. Not knowing where the technology existed proved more damaging than the technology itself. Second, disrupting fundamental tactical assumptions can collapse entire military systems that took decades to develop. Japanese doctrine assumed night combat would always favor superior training over technology. When this assumption proved false, the entire tactical framework collapsed rapidly. Third, information dominance provides advantages that transcend firepower in their strategic impact. Seeing while remaining unseen creates psychological effects beyond immediate tactical advantage. The infrared sniper scopes killed relatively few Japanese soldiers directly. But their psychological and tactical impact affected the entire Japanese defense of Okinawa. The full story of infrared employment on Okinawa remained classified for decades after the war. Key documents were only declassified in the 1990s as Cold War restrictions were lifted. These included Technical Manual TM 59341 detailing the sniper scope system. After-action reports from the 96th and 7th Infantry Divisions provided tactical details. Intelligence summaries from the Allied translator and interpreter section revealed Japanese responses. Post-war interrogation reports from the Strategic Bombing Survey completed the picture. These documents reveal both the revolutionary nature of the technology and the lengths taken to protect it. Even after the war ended, details about infrared capabilities remained restricted for years. Veterans were discouraged from discussing their experiences with the devices in any detail. This security consciousness indicates how valuable the capability was considered for future conflicts. The one-sided nature of infrared combat raised ethical questions that persist in modern warfare discussions. Is it ethical to employ technology that removes the enemy's ability to fight back effectively? The infrared sniper scope operators on Okinawa wrestled with this question nightly. Post-war military ethicists have debated whether such overwhelming technological advantages constitute honorable warfare. Some argue that any advantage that saves friendly lives is justified in wartime. Others contend that warfare requires some element of reciprocal risk to remain legitimate rather than simple execution. The debate continues in modern discussions of asymmetric warfare. The Japanese perspective, expressed through post-war military writings, generally accepted the technology as legitimate evolution of warfare. The shame was not in facing superior technology, but in failing to anticipate and prepare for it. The infrared sniper scope was seen as another example of American material superiority. Frustrating, but not illegitimate in the context of total war. The infrared sniper scope's success on Okinawa influenced American military development for decades following the war. The emphasis on maintaining technological superiority became central to American military doctrine, particularly in sensors and information systems. The lessons of 1945 guided investment decisions. The concept of owning the night became central to American military thinking. Investment in night vision technology continued through the Cold War and beyond into modern conflicts. Each generation of technology widened the gap between those who could see in darkness and those who could not. The advantage first demonstrated with primitive infrared devices on Okinawa became defining. It became a defining characteristic of American military superiority worldwide. For potential adversaries, Okinawa demonstrated that traditional advantages could be negated by technology overnight. Training, motivation, and tactical doctrine meant nothing against superior censors. This lesson influenced military development worldwide for decades. It spurred massive investment in night vision and other sensor technologies globally. The revolution that began with 150 primitive infrared devices has shaped global military competition ever since the war ended. Every major military power now invests heavily in night vision technology. The technological arms race that began on Okinawa continues today. Based on declassified documents and technical manuals, the actual specifications of the T3RM3 carbine with infrared sniper scope were precisely documented. Weight approximately 28 to 30 pounds for the complete system with all components. Effective range varied from 70 yards in poor conditions to 125 yards in ideal circumstances. Battery life lasted 20 to 30 minutes of continuous use or 3 to 4 hours intermittent operation. Image intensifier used the RCA 1P25 tube as the core component. Power source consisted of a 6-volt lead-acid battery pack worn on the operator's back. Infrared source was a sealed beam lamp with specialized infrared filter. Production numbers were limited. Approximately 1,700 scopes were manufactured during the war. About 150 complete systems were deployed to Okinawa for combat testing. These specifications, while primitive by modern standards, represented revolutionary capability in 1945 warfare. The ability to engage targets accurately at 70-plus yards in complete darkness was unprecedented in infantry combat throughout military history. The introduction of infrared night vision technology during the Battle of Okinawa marked a turning point in military history that reverberates today. For the first time in warfare, technology allowed one side to completely dominate darkness. Darkness had traditionally been the domain of superior training and individual skill. The Japanese infantry, masters of night combat for 40 years, discovered their greatest tactical advantage had become obsolete overnight. Approximately 150 infrared-equipped carbines, operated by specially trained American soldiers, contributed to a fundamental shift in the Pacific War's final battle. While accounting directly for a relatively small percentage of total casualties, these devices achieved something far more significant strategically. They broke the Japanese military's confidence in their ability to fight effectively against American forces. The psychological impact extended far beyond immediate tactical effects in individual engagements. Japanese forces abandoned night operations across the entire front. This wasn't limited to areas where infrared devices were present. The psychological effect paralyzed operations everywhere. Supply lines were severed, positions became isolated, and coordinated defense became impossible across the battlefield. The sophisticated tactical system that had served Japan throughout the war collapsed. It fell before American technology that seemed to transcend human limitations. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, one of the few senior Japanese officers to survive Okinawa, wrote in his memoir words that captured the despair. The Americans had conquered nature itself. They turned our allied darkness into their weapon. We faced not just superior firepower, but superior science. Against this, courage alone meant nothing. The American soldiers who operated these first night vision devices were pioneers in a new form of warfare. Information dominance mattered more than firepower in this new reality. Seeing meant winning in ways previous generations couldn't imagine. Their experiences, both tactical successes and psychological burdens, established patterns that continue in modern combat. Technology provides overwhelming advantages that change the nature of warfare itself. The Battle of Okinawa proved that technology could fundamentally alter warfare's nature in ways no one anticipated. The infrared sniper scope didn't just provide a tactical advantage to individual operators, it destroyed an entire military doctrine built over decades of experience and refinement. Japanese forces, who had perfected night combat since 1904, found themselves helpless. They faced American soldiers who could see in the dark while remaining completely invisible themselves. The numbers tell only part of the story of this technological revolution. 150 devices deployed across the battlefield. 30% of night casualties in the first week attributed to infrared-equipped units. 94% reduction in Japanese night operations over 2 months. The real victory was psychological rather than purely tactical. Complete demoralization of an enemy who realized their training meant nothing. Their courage couldn't overcome American technology they couldn't understand or counter. Their tactics, refined over decades, were useless against sensors they didn't know existed. From April to June 1945, the night battles of Okinawa demonstrated a fundamental truth. This truth remains relevant in every modern conflict. In modern warfare, the side that can see while remaining unseen doesn't just possess an advantage. They own the entire battlefield and control the tempo of operations. The primitive infrared sniper scopes of 1945 began a revolution in military technology that continues evolving today. These devices weighed 30 pounds and could see only 70 yards in darkness. Yet, they started a transformation that shapes modern warfare. The Japanese infantry never expected American carbines to see clearly at 70 yards in complete darkness. That failure of imagination, combined with American technological innovation, contributed to ending the Pacific War. It established the template for American military superiority that persists today across multiple domains. In the green-tinted world of those first infrared scopes, American soldiers glimpsed the future of warfare clearly. A future where technology would matter more than numbers of troops, where information would matter more than raw firepower, where owning the night would mean owning victory itself. The lessons from Okinawa's night battles echo through every modern conflict. Whenever one side possesses overwhelming technological advantages, the same patterns emerge. The psychological impact often exceeds the immediate tactical effects. The infrared sniper scope was more than a weapon system. It was a glimpse into a future where warfare would be dominated by technology. Not by who could fight harder, but by who could see farther and strike more precisely. The Japanese soldiers who faced this technology in 1945 were the first to learn what every military force now knows. In the age of advanced technology, darkness no longer provides cover or concealment. The side that cannot see has already lost before fighting begins.